Alright guys, so today I'm going to be having a quick look at some archaeological news. Now, in the town of Ryburgh, which is in Norfolk in England, a discovery has been made of 81 graves which are thought to be early Anglo-Saxon Christian graves, the date being between the 7th and the 9th century. Now, if we look at this map here of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, we can see that Ryburgh would have been right in the middle of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of East Anglia, which was one of the most powerful kingdoms in the Anglo-Saxon period. Now, the graves have been very well preserved because of the waterlogged conditions of the river. So, for example, you've got the combination of the sand, which is very acidic, and then with the water, which is alkaline, which has helped to preserve both the timber graves and the bones of the people inside, which we don't normally get with finds from this era because it's at least 1,400 years old. And when we get that older wood and things, they rot away, but then this time they haven't because of the conditions. So it's quite a special site, which has given us a lot of insight. Now, they found this because they were going to build flood defences in the area, but before they did, they dug some trenches, and then in these trenches they found evidence of these graves, and that's how we've come across this early Christian site. Now, the coffins themselves were made of hollowed out oak trees, so they made planks out of these oak trees and then buried them inside the ground. So rather than having a pre-prepared coffin which they put the body in, they dug a pit and then they'd put the timber around the edges and then put the body inside. Now, it's believed that the people found in these graves later formed a community, or their descendants later formed a Christian community where there was a monastery which was built in the region, so they think that these might have been some of the first Christians in that region who then later went on to build this monastic site. Now, why do we think it's Christian rather than pagan? Because in the early 7th century, pretty much all of the Anglo-Saxons were still very much pagans. Well, the evidence that we have so far is that there weren't any grave goods found inside the graves, and obviously for a pagan it's very important to have your worldly possessions and things like that inside. So on a Viking grave, for example, an early Viking grave, you will find things like, the swords, you'll find amulets, beads, things that were traded, coins, that sort of thing. But in these ones there were no grave goods, although artifacts were found around about the graves. Furthermore, you've got the fact that the bodies were facing east-west, which is also a very Christian thing. The idea being that when Christ rose again, then the bodies would be facing the right way, so that they would look up into heaven and see Christ. And as well as this was that they think that they have found a timber church in the area, so they found foundations, but they can't confirm yet that this was a church, but they think it's highly likely that that would have been the church of this congregation. It's quite interesting to think because Ethelbert of Kent was the first Anglo-Saxon king to convert to Christianity, which he did in the very early years of the 7th century. And obviously Kent, if we think back to the map, is right below the kingdom of East Anglia. Now, Ethelbert of Kent might have been the first Anglo-Saxon king to convert, but his son Eadbald was a pagan, although he also soon converted, as did Radvald, who was the king of East Anglia, and it's thought that Radvald is the king who was responsible for the mass burial at Sutton Hoo, which is a very famous Anglo-Saxon site in East Anglia as well. So it's quite interesting to think that these early Christians who were found in these graves might have known, spoken to, even might have been related to the pagans who buried their great hoard, their wealth, all these weapons that have been found at Sutton Hoo, because it's exactly the same time period. At least that's what they think. We're not sure about the specific date, but it's a lot of things are pointing to that it's almost the same time period as Sutton Hoo. So it's quite tantalizing to think that they might have known each other, the people who were buried in these very early Christian graves in East Anglia, and the pagans who left us the magnificent finds at Sutton Hoo. Alright, so that's a little bit of archaeological news for you all. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be coming back with some proper, longer historical videos for you all soon, so stay tuned for that. Alright guys, like, comment and subscribe. This has been History with Hilbert, bringing you some archaeological news.